Recently, we have seen quite a bit happen on the prophecy front as we look to the Middle East. And we saw last week that Israel signed a peace deal with the United Arab Emirates. This was the third Arab country to sign such a peace deal, going all the way back to 1979 when Egypt signed a peace deal when President Carter was in office, and I think it was 1994, somewhere around there, when Jordan signed a peace deal with Israel under Bill Clinton's presidency. And now here we see the United Arab Emirates signing a peace deal. Now, what makes this interesting is that we know that President Trump has been trying to get a peace deal accomplished there in the Middle East. That's been one of his biggest goals, maybe the biggest goal he had when he came into office of the president. And his first national or international trip, once he was voted in as president, was to Saudi Arabia, where he met with all the Arab leaders of that region. And what's interesting about his approach is he's gone about getting a peace deal done in a totally different way than previous administrations. He has went to the Arab neighbors of Israel. And the reason he wanted to do that was he had the philosophy, I'm talking about President Trump right now, the philosophy to get all the Arab neighbors of Israel on board for a peace deal, because he knew that the Palestinians would just continue to do what they've always done, which is reject any kind of peace talks. And by getting the Arab neighbors on board with a peace deal, that would apply pressure to the Palestinians to not only come to the table, but eventually get a deal done, even if the Palestinians didn't want to do it. Now, we really haven't heard a lot about it up until last week. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we're starting to see this flurry of activity happening as the American presidential election is approaching. I think a lot of these Arab countries are wanting to get something done while President Trump is still in office, just in case he gets voted out of office in November. It's no secret that all these Arab countries, apart from Iran, of course, and Iraq, maybe Yemen as well, but all these other Arab neighbors have been supportive of this peace deal that President Trump has been trying to get done. Under radar, behind the scenes, they're all for it. Publicly, they haven't said a whole lot because they're trying to get something done without creating all-out chaos in the Middle East. So when the United Arab Emirates came out publicly and said we are signing a peace deal with Israel, I think that opened the door for a lot of the other Arab countries there to do the same. I think we can expect to see Saudi Arabia to do the same. I think Bahrain is going to do the same. The Sudan has said they want to sign a peace deal. I know Oman has said they want to do the peace deal. Now even Lebanon has come out and said they are open to peace talks with Israel. And of course, we know what's happened in Lebanon with that big explosion and all the chaos that's happened over there, where their frontline government have all resigned. So now they're in a place of vulnerability. And so let's put all this in perspective of what the Bible's talking about. All these separate peace deals that we have seen happen, such as the one we saw last week with the United Arab Emirates, are not the peace deal that we read about in Daniel chapter 9. But they are all part of the puzzle that will lead to eventually that peace deal of Daniel chapter 9 happening. When we see Israel sign a peace deal with the Palestinians, that will be the peace deal of Daniel chapter 9. And it's critical that all these Arab countries come on board with a peace deal and put the pressure on the Palestinians because I believe that's what God is going to use to get that peace deal done. In fact, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has already come out just a couple of days ago and said that with all the Arab countries agreeing to a separate individual peace deal with Israel, it will pressure the Palestinians to get a deal done. I mean, he's come out and said, I mean, I think this is what everybody over there is envisioning. This is what they're expecting to happen. When will it happen? I don't know. For the longest time, I thought that God would probably keep President Trump in office because he is a pro-Israeli president. He is a very pro freedom president. He's a pro-national president. In other words, he has no desire to be part of a new world order. To me, that's good being an American because I don't want America to be part of the new world order. If we're part of the new world order, you can guarantee that whenever the mark of the beast comes out down the road, that Americans will be forced to take it. But if we have a president and leadership that is anti-new world order, we have a chance that we don't have to have that mark. So those are just my personal hopes. But I'm trusting God that obviously He's going to work through any president, whether it's President Trump, Joe Biden, or anybody else. God's going to do what He's going to do. And, so for the longest time, I thought that God would keep President Trump in office because of all these positives that I see concerning end-time events. But, I don't know. President Trump is not the Antichrist. We know that the Antichrist will rise from the European Union and the New World Order. He'll be a European. Lots of people ask me this question, well, if President Trump gets a peace deal done, he's got to be the Antichrist, right? And I'm like, no. In Daniel chapter 9, let's pay very close attention to the wording of those verses that talk about the Antichrist. It says the Antichrist will confirm a covenant. For the longest time, our traditional thought is that he's the one that's going to make it happen. He's going to get the deal done. That's not necessarily the truth. It says he will confirm. He'll confirm a covenant. Confirm means there's something already in place. So I'm looking at our election. I'm wondering. I'm just thinking out loud. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm wondering, will God remove Trump from the office of our presidency, allow Biden to come in, and by removing Trump, he opens the door for a European figure to step up and to push this peace deal across the finish line? I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens between now and November, and then see what happens, obviously, with our presidential election. We could see all these Arab neighbors sign official deals before our election. September is usually a really big month for the nation of Israel. Who knows what's going to happen? Things have happened so quickly. Things are just moving like crazy. They're moving really fast right now. And honestly, it's hard to keep up with all of it. But I don't know exactly how God's going to work through all that we're seeing right now. I just know that He is working, and He's really got the whole world distracted with this coronavirus. And completely under the radar, we're seeing all these things happen in the Middle East. I've told you this before, and I'm going to reiterate it here. Keep your eyes on Israel. The pandemic is certainly important, and all the chaos we see going on in the world is important, but God's clock is the nation of Israel. That tribulation, that period of 7 years that we call the tribulation, the Old Testament calls it the 70th week of Daniel's prophecy. It's really about the nation of Israel. So when that peace covenant is signed and it becomes official with the Palestinians, it kicks off that final 7 years, and that final 7 years is about God dealing with the nation of Israel and the Jews in order to prepare them to receive their Messiah, whom we know is Jesus, and when He comes back for the second time at the end of that 7 years. So it's really about Israel. So watch Israel. Watch and see what God is doing over there. I'm watching some candidates that I believe are candidates for the Antichrist. We won't know until he stands in the temple that will be rebuilt during that final 7 years. But there's some people in place that are very strong candidates. Somebody that's very active in the Middle East right now is the French president, Emmanuel Macron. We know what Emmanuel means, God with us. His last name, Macron, means Mark. Very interesting. But he is all about getting a peace deal done. The people of Lebanon have called him their savior. If you recall back in history, France once, kind of ruled over that nation of Lebanon, and then Lebanon became its own nation and free from France's reign. But now they're asking Emmanuel Macron in France to come back again and oversee that nation. So there's just a lot going on, and I'm very excited with anticipation. I want to see what God's going to do here. So all these things that are happening right now, obviously God's working through them, and eventually a peace deal is going to get done. Will we see? Here's another question I have: is with all these individual peace deals getting done, it's making a lot of other Arab nations angry, such as Iran. Will we see, instead of peace, before that peace deal gets done, will we see a war break out? We know that the Bible talks about that there will be wars that will break out. Ezekiel 38 talks about a war where Russia, Iran, Turkey all invade Israel. That hasn't happened yet. Will that happen before the tribulation or in the tribulation? We know that Revelation chapter 9 talks about a world war that will kill a third of the world's population. Will that happen before the tribulation or after the tribulation? All these things that are happening right now in the Middle East, will they trigger peace or war? We don't know all the answers to that question, and only time will tell. But it's just exciting times that we live in. And I just want to give you a quick update of what I see happening over there. And let's just continue to keep our eyes on the things of the kingdom of God, and not be worried or afraid or full of anxiety, but let us just trust God that He knows what He's doing, and we are secure in His hands, and He'll provide for us. And ultimately, when it's said and done, we're always going to spend eternity with Him. That's the good news. And I'm thankful that Jesus paid the price for us. And I'm thankful that He's allowed us to have the privilege of living in this time of history, to where we can see these things unfolding before our very eyes. Anyway, thank you for listening. Share this if you want to. Like it. As you know, that this channel was created really to get the good news of Jesus Christ out to the world. By talking about how close we are to the return of Christ. We're right on the doorstep of the tribulation happening, and we know that the return of Christ happens at the end of that tribulation. So we're right there, and so share this with as many people as possible to at least get people thinking about their standing with God, and maybe helping people see things in the world through a biblical worldview and not through society. Anyway, thank you for listening. Have a great day.